Good day, and thank you for taking time from busy schedules to join me and in this next webinar in a series of webinars we've been doing for IISE for the past 3 years. I think this is our 102nd webinar now, all on the focus of on the topic of performance excellence. And today we're going to be I'm going to be walking through a detailed case study with you from a role that I played in a global life science company a number of years ago. But the case example I think is still timely, and it's obviously salient given the challenging times that we face in our organizations. So I'm looking forward to sharing my experiences with you. Just wanted to double check, Mike. I know you're out there. Am I coming through loud and clear? Oh, thank you, Mike. So Saif is joining me today. He's a compadre, and the Poirier Group works with me, and he's going to be helping out a little bit today, feeding you some information that'll help you learn a little bit more about how you can get access to things after the webinar is over. So thanks again for joining us. As I said, Saif will chat links to the IISE website and some links for the Poirier Group that'll help you get different products coming out of this webinar today. I will be monitoring the chat function in Zoom, so use that function to share questions and comments with me if you would, please. And follow-up questions are welcomed, of course, and contact information is provided at the end of the presentation. For those of you that like these certificates of participation in the CEU credits, IISE will be mailing those out roughly a week after the webinar. And thanks once again to the Poirier Group for sponsoring and hosting and programming and directing this overall program for IISE. So the focus today is to continue to share my points of view and others on business process management for what's called business process management or industry 4.0 and 5.0, and specifically to start to zoom in on how do we build better business process improvement programs. And in particular, Jared Frederici will be joining us on the 8th of December, and he'll be really zooming in on what I would call the portfolio management aspect of business process improvement. How do you pick the right projects? And that's a particularly important topic given the challenges, the economic challenges that most organizations face today. So today I'm going to talk about at a more macro level, how do you design, develop, deploy enterprise-wide organizational OpEx, whatever you want to call it, business process improvement programs. And then Jared will, in part 2 on December 8th, Jared will focus on how do we make sure that we're picking the right projects, and then how do we create migration strategies and plans of action for those projects. So just real quickly to create some context, as I mentioned, we've done over 100 webinars since late 2019. They are bucketed in or categorized in those 10 blue boxes that you see there. Saif has chatted you the link to the IISE website. In particular, that link that Saif gave you is for the operational and business process excellence box, which is where this webinar will be placed. That's an on-demand location for you at the IISE website. So this is an example. So this is a list of, in chronological order, the newest at the top, the oldest at the bottom, of the things that we've done in industry and service 4.0 and 5.0, and then today's focus, operational and business process excellence. All of the webinars that we've done in OpEx really have focused on how, I would say, focused on the end game of how do you accelerate benefits realization? How do you get improved value in the enterprise quicker, better? That's really, I think, been the focus of all the conversations we've had as it relates to OpEx. And then we've continued to grow our on-demand library of best practice case studies, and you can see that long list there that you can access also. So the theme of all these webinars has been on what I would call integrated systems engineering. In particular, how do we do a better job of integrating people, strategy, process, and technology? And I think most of us on the call today understand that industrial and systems engineers, that discipline, that degree, is a fantastic foundation to play a leadership role, to play a significant role in helping organizations achieve accelerated performance excellence by integrating people, strategy, process, and technology. So that's sort of been the overarching theme. We've done a whole bunch of webinars focused on the topic that I'm going to talk about today. Most recently, the 6th of October, Jim Dobson and Jared Frederici talked about, their focus was on perspectives and points of view and migration strategies for achieving business process management 4.0 and 5.0. Back in 15th of March this year, we did a case study with Eduardo Toledo, who is VP of Business Excellence for Flex. Great case example of a outstanding global organization that's doing a great job with OpEx. Back in October of 2021, Jared and I talked a little bit about how industrial and systems engineering is evolving as in the context of business process management 4.0. Another webinar just in advance, just prior to that, on the 23rd of September, and then way back in April of last year, Debbie Nightingale and David Boyer joined me, and we talked about how do you create strategies for transformation of organizations at work. So I just run through these real quickly to let you know that there's a lot of material there for you to take advantage of if you have the time and the inclination that will serve as foundational for the conversation that I have with you today. So this is the storyline for today. We're going to talk about, it's all about B, and I'll explain what I mean by that. And then we'll talk a little bit about what does the concept design look like for architecting and engineering great business process improvement programs. And then we'll sort of start to switch to detailed design and look at some of the components that make up the design of a BPI program in an organization. So what I mean by B is, and I've shared this slide and this abstraction with you all a number of times. I think it's an interesting abstraction. It helps us think about how we spend our time, how not only we spend our time, but how our employees spend their time. And so there's really, it's a pie, it's a Venn diagram, a pie, and there's slices in the pie. And there's 4 basic slices. There's the A work, which is we do our jobs, right? So we get hired for a job. We've got a job description. We've got a role. We got a seat in the bus. We do that work. So that's administer our day jobs. And then there's B, which is build a business. There are people who spend time doing A and B. And what I mean by B is build a business. So they focus on not only doing the business, doing their day jobs, but also at the same time thinking about how to improve doing their day jobs. And some organizations have OpEx programs, they've got BPI programs, they've got industrial engineers who maybe spend the bulk of their time doing B. That's what they're paid to do. They're paid to focus on how do we help the organization, people in the organization improve what we do and how we do it. In most organizations, I think, and then let me finish the 4 letters. So C, cater to crises. We fight fires. We do things that are unexpected. And then D, do the dumb. So we waste time. We do non-value add things. We do the right things the wrong way. We do the wrong things the right way, and we do the wrong things the wrong way. So we got the D, so to speak. And in most of our organizations, what I find when I go in and talk to people is that there's a lot more C and a lot more D and a lot less B than people would like and believe is optimal in terms of the utilization of people's time and energy, how people spend their life's energy in organizations. So the challenge, I think, in most organizations when they think about creating a BPI program is how is this program, how is some dedicated resources to improving value add, to reducing waste, to improving productivity and quality? How do we drive a wedge of B into the organization and not have the C and D squeeze it out? So you can sort of think about that red slice and the gold slice on the left, sort of putting pressure on that light green sliver of B. And most organizations, that's the way it feels. The B is getting squeezed out by the C and the D. So what we have to do is we have to architect and engineer business process improvement programs, the industrial engineering function, so that we're intelligently and systematically finding ways to drive that wedge of B into the organization, and have B become a more normal element of how people spend their time. Now, this has been happening. That what I just said has been happening slowly but surely for the last 100+ years. And so this is a chart that, again, I've shared with in a number of the previous webinars, that is just sort of focuses on a little bit on quality mostly, but the evolution of Lean and Six Sigma. And so I'm not going to go into this in detail. Some of you have lived a portion of this and probably have read about early stages of this. But this is the foundation upon which modern, what I would call 20th century, 21st century business process improvement programs are sitting. They're sitting on top of all this work and this learning and this knowledge. And so that's the history and the foundation. But the current state that we're in a situation where price recovery as a way of sustaining profits. Price recovery is the rate at which I change my prices in relationship to the rate at which my costs are going up. You're in a negative price recovery situation when the prices are going up, when costs are going up faster than you can raise prices. Many organizations are in that kind of a situation. When you get into recessionary headwinds, price recovery starts to diminish as a way of sustaining levels, margins, so to speak. And so what happens is the emphasis has to change dramatically and rapidly to productivity improvement, which should make industrial and systems engineers heroes, because that's what we do well, right? That's what we're great at. So what we have to do is help organizations learn how to get better at driving productivity faster. And so that's the opportunity that faces most of us. And so the question then is, how do we do that? How do we leverage what we know, what we can do, and make sure that we're fully applying the knowledge and the skills and the capabilities that industrial and systems engineering can bring to organizations? So we're faced with, in my opinion, in most organizations, we're faced with a from-to situation. In 2022, we've got organizations that are fixated on problem solving. There, in many cases, are unclear visions and misalignment around a vision, if it exists. There's an unconscious and semi-conscious, people are unconscious and semi-conscious around waste. So it's sort of there and they sort of sense it, but they haven't been trained to see it, and they certainly haven't been trained to know how to eliminate it. People are at effect versus at cause, and I'm going to explain that a little bit later, those terms a little bit later. There's unfocused improvement. So the improvement, the portfolios of projects are not rationalized. They're not well thought through the way I think they should be rationalized and thought through. So unfocused improvement. There's low process maturity levels. Scale 1 to 5, we see a lot of 1.2, 1.5, low 2s. There's unclear, what I call R2A2, unclear roles, responsibilities, accountabilities, and authorities. That's for sure true on the B side of things. And I believe it's true on the A side of things. It's more true on the A side of things than it should be. A lot of the work that we find ourselves doing is going in and helping organizations get more clarity, wrap their hands around, wrap their minds around roles and responsibilities and accountabilities and authorities. It's just, It's not, they haven't done a systematic job of getting that clear. And then I think most organizations are underperforming, and this is what Jim Collins found in his research. Some of you may have read his work. Underperformance in most organizations by a factor of 10 times. So that's the default position for many organizations. And so the challenge in front of us is how to migrate from that condition to the condition on the right. We're creation skillful. Doesn't mean we don't do problem solving, but we're also doing more creation skillfulness. We're creating things, bringing new capabilities into reality. Clear visions, future states, top down and across the organization. Conscious competence with respect to organizational and operational excellence. So people are aware of waste. They know how to see waste. They know what to do. They have a mechanism. They're enabled and empowered to remove waste, minimize waste. People are rowing together. So that's the Minnesota head coach concept of, rowing a boat. We're all rowing together, right? So people are rowing together. And then focused and aligned improvement, process maturity levels are 3 to 4, driving to 5. No role ambiguity and no conflict, and full potential performance is defined. So we may not be at full potential performance, but we know what full potential performance is, and we have a systematic method or migration strategy to move in that direction. And so the blue arrows in the middle represent essentially what I'm going to go through with you, the case study. And because that's what I was faced with when I joined MDS, the organization that I'm going to do the case study for. I faced what was on the left. And so my job was, in 3 years or less, migrate from the left to the right. And that's what I'm going to walk through with you. And these blue arrows represent essentially the steps that I took to accomplish that. I'm going to skip over that real quickly. That's a slide I pulled out of the presentation from Flex. But this is an example of how an example of how Flex has been migrating over the last 20 years. The timeline down there, the dates are off, but I think if I recall correctly, that's a 20-year evolution of business process improvement maturation at Flex. So this happens to be very tool centric. But I thought it was a good example to show you some case studies of what people are doing, what some of the better organizations are doing. The point I've showed this slide a number of times too. The point I want to make is that when we talk about business process improvement, we're really talking about something that spans the entire x-axis of business process improvement change. So all the way over from functional specific projects to extended value chains, literally reaching out to suppliers and vendors, reaching out and embracing customers. So BPI, when I talk about BPI, I'm talking about that whole x-axis. I'm also talking about, the whole y-axis. So ranging from at the bottom of the y-axis, just improving process efficiency, just going in and eliminating some waste, maybe doing Kaizen events, all the way up to optimizing value chains and maybe even redefining the industry. So this conversation today is a very broad, pervasive, enterprise-wide conversation around how industrial and systems engineers can help organizations achieve full potential performance. And I've been part of doing it. So the chart on the left comes from Jim Collins' book, Built to Last, and then his follow-up book, Good to Great. And so you see the chart on the left, the visionary companies that he studied. I think there were 18 visionary companies. Those 18 companies took $1 and made it 6,300 over the time span. These are index numbers, so to speak, index numbers. The comparison firms that he studied took $1 and made it 1,000. And if you think about the difference between 1,000 and 6,400, that's a big difference, right? That's an order of magnitude difference. And yet, interestingly, when he went in and talked to the people in the pretty good companies that took $1 and made it 1,000 and said, "How did you do?" They said, "We've done pretty good." And he said, "What is a pretty good?" And they said 7 out of 10. Well, I think if you do your math, most of you are pretty quantitative and analytic. If you do your math, 1,000 in relationship to 6,400 isn't a 7 out of 10, right? It's more like a 1.2 out of 10. That's why Jim Collins said, good is the enemy of great. If you're pretty good and you hang your hat on pretty good and you don't know what great really looks like, then $1,000 from one may look great to you. The example that I show on the right is the company that David and I were part of. In fact, it's the first project that David Poirier and I worked together on. And we started the project in 1992. And so you can see, and from 1992 to 1998, all of that growth you see from stock price of $6 in 1995 timeframe to $60 in 2007 timeframe, all of that growth happened because of the 8-year NG, what we call NG98 transformation project that we worked on. And we did exactly what I'm going to real quickly talk to you about today. Exactly the same formula, exactly the same roadmap. So that's why people like me get so excited about business process improvement and doing it right. It's because the proof's in the pudding, right? I mean, that's what happens when you learn how to do it right and you execute on that. So this is the case study that I'm going to talk to you about, and the company was what's called MDS. MDS doesn't exist anymore in the form that it was in when David and I were there. It went through. It started back in the I don't know, in the early '80s, maybe as early as '67, I think. There was some IBMers that got together and bought a lab services company, and then they just started growing, acquiring a variety of different kinds of organizations, manufacturing medical isotopes, manufacturing analytic technology, pharma services, and so forth. And so I joined them with David in the 2002 to 2007 timeframe, that period. So as I said, this is a dated case. But I tell you, if I had a job of going into an organization and they said, build us a world-class BPI program, I'd do it exactly the way I did it back then. Now, obviously, I would change a few things. I've learned a lot since that point in time, and there's some things that I wouldn't do the same way. But what I'm going to share with you is still, I think, salient and relevant. So, what I'm going to do is I sort of voice over slides. I'm going to talk to you about how to build programs, BPI programs, but how do we do it in the 20s? The 20s are different than the early 2000s. As you know, 2002 to 2006 was just in front of that recession we had in 07, 08, right? Big bad recession, just like the one that we're about ready to enter, or we're in the front end of. So, and back at the turn of the century, we hadn't really had these black swans. Now, we did have 911. That was a black swan event for sure. But you know, what these black swan, the pandemic, for example, it looks like we're in for a decade of disruptions being the new normal. And so the question is, how do we create organizations and business process improvement programs that are more resilient to disruptions? And in 2023, we're going to be faced with how do we build BPI programs and improve them so that not only can they handle disruptions for the organization, but they can also stand the test of economic headwinds that we're going to probably face in 2023. So when I started to build the program for MDS back in the early 2000s, I went back to this article. I really like this article by John Cotter, Harvard Business Review. He talked about 8 reasons why organizational transformations fail. And then if you just take those failure modes and you transition them to, this is the failure mode, so don't do this, right? Then you come up with these 8 things to do. So a lot of those 8 things that he talked about in that article, that seminal article, really became foundational thinking for me as I built the program for MDS in 2003 timeframe. And there's some really cool, if you Google this article that was written, there's some really cool infographics that I really like, so you can find a lot of neat things that you can very quickly sort of understand the essence of what John Cotter was talking about in that article back in 2007. Actually, the article was published earlier than 2007. I think that infographic is 2007. So when I started, I got this notion. So I said, so this is the way it is in MDS, and this is the way we want it to be in four to 6 years. And so what are the fronts? So I sort of characterized it as fronts. I sort of thought of it as in a little bit of a war metaphor. And in wars, we're unfortunately Ukraine is on our minds every day, and you've seen fronts getting pushed on both sides. And so if you think about the war metaphor, not that I like that metaphor particularly, but if you think about it, you can't let one front get too far ahead of another front. I mean, that's sort of conceptually, you think about the metaphor. If a front gets too far out, then it can get cut off, right? You can't let any front lag behind. So the same concept here. There are fronts in business process improvement, organizational transformations, and you have to manage across all those fronts. So one of the things that I realized and I saw when I did my benchmarking, when I started this initiative, I went out and I looked, I called up 8 to 10 of the best Lean Sigma programs that I could find in the US and Canada. And I went and I made a site visit. I spent 2 days with each one of them. And I said, tell me about what you've done. Tell me about what's worked. Tell me about what hasn't worked. So I did a ton of benchmarking. And what I found was that they were, and I'm using my terms, but what I found was that they missed fronts, and they sort of realized it after they got into it. And they said, we didn't push the measurement front fast enough. So we were doing important improvement projects, but we didn't have a means to measure whether we were making a difference. So we couldn't evaluate whether anything was working. So those were little things, little anecdotal things that I picked up on that I built into the way that we went about this. So what I did is I turned Lean Sigma on itself, and I said, well, in Lean Sigma, we talk about Y as a function of X, right? So Y is the primary, Y is the outcome variable that we're wanting to improve, and the X's are the factors that are the drivers, right? Like in an analysis of variance, they're the factors that have the biggest impact on the Y. So I worked with the top leaders, the CEO and his direct reports, and I said, what do you guys want? What does done look like for you for the Lean Sigma program? And they gave me, these are just examples of bullets that they said. We want these things from the Lean Sigma program. We get that, we're going to be a better business. So then I sat down, and after my benchmarking, I said, what are the factors that are going to drive that? What are the factors that I have to manage as the VP of Business Process Improvement in order to create those outcomes? And these are the factors that I came up with. And so then I just started to work those factors. So obviously getting the leadership, support, getting them engaged, getting them aligned. So John Rogers was the CEO that hired David Poirier, and David hired me, and I came in, and we were joined at the hip. The three of us were joined at the hip in terms of the importance of business process improvement, the role that business process improvement play. In 2005, John was replaced by a new CEO. He was a young leader who had come from a pharma services organization that had done a great Lean Sigma deployment. So he understood the power of Lean Sigma. And so when he came in, this was his slide. One of the first slides he showed people was that these were, in politics, we talk about a politician has a platform, and then there are planks in the platform. You've probably heard that metaphor, right? So these are his planks. This was his platform as a CEO, and these are his planks. Notice at the bottom, those are his words down there. So here I am. I've been there 2 years. I started a Lean Sigma program, and the new CEO stands up and he's got me on the bottom row. I'm going, I got it made, right? This is unbelievable. Now, my point is that not all of you are in that situation. So somehow you've got to find a way to get the senior leadership to have OpEx as a plank in their platform. And if that doesn't exist, then you need to find a way to make that happen. Fortunately for me, it existed, and so that made my life easier, and it really accelerated things for me. So some of the other key success factors were we got a best-in-class specialty consulting firm out of Denver, Colorado, to come in, and I figured, I'm smart and I'm an industrial engineer and I've read up on this stuff and I've done benchmarking. I can do this myself. And then I thought, yeah, but there's people that have been doing this for 10 years and they can probably accelerate. They know stuff I don't know because they've been down the road, right? And up until this point, pretty much I'd been a professor at Virginia Tech and Ohio State and Oklahoma State. And I'd done a lot of consulting, but this was the first time I had a full-time vice president business process improvement job. So I'm sitting there thinking, I can muddle through this and I probably won't make too many mistakes. But if I brought in some people that do this for a living, boy, that's really going to help us. So we brought them in and it made a huge difference. It cost us a little bit of money. I had to sell it to my leadership, to the CEO of the company, but it was a pretty easy sell, actually. And then the next thing we did is, and I find this is a failure mode for a lot of organizations, we invested in what I would call an enterprise program management system. Back then it was called Enterprise Track. I think Cisco or Oracle has since bought Enterprise Track, and Stantis, I think, was the company that started this. But having a really good program and project management system that we got really disciplined about keeping the data in. And Safe and I are working with a number of companies on CRM systems. And so one of the challenges that people have with CRM systems is that people aren't disciplined at keeping the data fresh, keeping the data current, keeping the data complete. Same thing is true for project and program management systems. So we had to build that habit. But once we did that, it really laid a foundation for us to create some visibility for progress and performance on critical projects, and helped us understand where are we with things at any given point in time. And I can't tell you the hours that it shaved for me as the vice president in terms of putting presentations together and talking about, what's the cumulative benefits that have been achieved, how many projects do we have in flight, how many projects do we have done, on and on and on. So the other thing that I spent a lot of time on was creating an enterprise, I called it a design, development, and deployment team, a DDT. And this design and development team was senior leaders and managers from each of the 12 units. So the 12 units are the four revenue generating business units, and then the eight enterprise shared services functional leaders. So human resources, supply chain management, finance, IT. Those are the shared support service functions. So we created a number of slides and concepts. This is sort of concept design type of stuff. So we knew we were going to create a bunch of process improvement specialists. So we set targets for ourselves in terms of how many process improvement specialists do we want to train and develop and deploy in the organization. We wanted Lean Sigma to be in the DNA of MDF. So we wanted that to be the way we thought, the way we lived, the way we breathed. And so we spent a lot of time talking about how our various systems all fit together. So we had ISO floating around in the pharma services business and the medical isotope business. We had some people doing balanced scorecard. We obviously had a lot of process auditing. We had an ERP and MRP system. We actually ended up upgrading to Oracle as part of this initiative. A major investment that was made by the organization. We obviously had a CRM system. And so then we wanted to build on top of that strategic thinking and planning, process management, Lean, Six Sigma, design for Six Sigma, and then research and development in terms of products and services and also processes. So we wanted to make sure that we built a business process improvement system that was highly integrated across all the various functional systems that existed in the organization. And back to the DNA, there's a great article, if you haven't read it, I love the article, Decoding the DNA of the Toyota Production System. Stephen Peer and Kent Bowen wrote the article in Harvard Business Review. And so what we did is we wanted to build a picture like this that reflected what does the DNA for operational excellence look like in MDS. And this was a good way for us to sort of shape our thinking about it. This article shaped our thinking around that. So I think the question for you all is, how would you characterize the DNA of your B system in your organization? What does that look like? And have you thought about that? And it forced me to think about literally, how do I alter the way people from secretaries, from people in warehouses moving things, all the way up to the CEO and his direct reports? How do people think about and talk about and behave in relationship to B, but also in relationship to C and D? So I started off, and my roadmap was I wanted to initialize and develop the infrastructure for the program. That was the first step. Then I wanted to make sure that I engaged the right people, and I got them engaged in a way that got them aligned and committed. And then I wanted to make sure that we picked the right projects. And then we wanted to do best-in-class training for our BPI team members so that they could facilitate, they could be the agile leaders for the project. And then we wanted to make sure that all the projects were executed in a disciplined fashion following a consistent methodology. Now, I'm going to keep it simple and not just say, because I think probably when I say that a consistent methodology, for most purposes, it was DMAIC, although we did a lot of design for Lean Sigma. So it was DMAIC or DCDOF, one of those two roadmaps, so to speak, were the way we went about improving process improvement. And then once we start to get some successes, celebrate those so that we can, what Jim Collins called, get the flywheel spinning, right? Get some momentum, get a head of steam, and then keep it moving. And so and this is one of the things that the group I hired from Denver, Colorado, they came in and they said, you guys need to write an e-handbook for your OpEx program. So we locked the CEO's direct reports. We locked them in a room for 3 days. And the company we hired had a straw man e-handbook for the deployment of Lean Sigma. And so we just went in and we just edited. So we didn't have to start from a blank sheet of paper. They had a handbook and we just went in and we just edited. So we were making decisions like, if I go out to pharma services and I decide I'm going to make somebody a black belt for a year, and the supervisor nominates somebody to be a black belt, how do we decide whether that's the right person? And if it is the right person and I take them out of a job, and so they're a black belt for a year, how do I make sure that being a black belt for a year doesn't adversely impact your career progress? So I'm just using that as an example. Those were the kinds of policies that people were thinking through, the kind of attention to detail that we're thinking through as we built out the BPI program for MDS. There were countless other examples. How are we going to reward the best teams? What kind of incentive system are we going to have for people doing great projects? And then, as I said, we bought Enterprise Track. I don't know, $300,000 decision. initial investment and started using that and loading that thing up. So lots of what I would call foundational infrastructural elements that were put in place to make sure that the program was on solid footing when we started to get it going. We created value stream owners. This was a little bit of a controversial, but from the outset, we created. So we had the CEO and the president of MDS, and then we had his direct reports. We had 4 lines of business, 4 revenue generating business units, and then we had the CIO, the CFO, the EVP for org dynamics, and then the other functions. And then we had the president of Enterprise Shared Services, which was, as I mentioned, David Poirier. And then we had Lean Sigma deployment leaders and managers. So in each of those units, there was my counterpart. So I was the deployment leader for the enterprise. In each of those subunits, there was a Scott Fink in each of those units. Somebody that was responsible for the deployment of Lean Sigma in that unit. And then we had value stream owners. So each of the business units identified their value streams. And we created a new role, a new seat in the bus called value stream owner. Now, it wasn't a full-time position. It was a collateral assignment. So the value stream owner was the person that looked across the value stream and made sure that the cross-functionally things were flowing across the value stream. That was a controversial decision. It was something I picked up on. And I did some benchmarking with Alcan, which is the Alcoa of Canada, 2 years after we started this. And I was talking to my counterpart at Alcan, and I said, you guys are way ahead of us, because they started 3 years before we did. And I said, you guys, this is a great program, 3 years ahead of us. He says, no, Scott, he said, you're ahead of us because you started with value stream owners. I'm just now doing it. And if I could do it over again, I would have value stream owners from the outset. So that was a sort of, again, a strategic choice on my part, but it really drove cross-functional thinking in the organization, and is really, really critical to our success. But it was an early investment that people were skeptical about. We did white belt sessions. I'm going to speed things up here a little bit quick because we're running out of time. We did white belt sessions with all 12 of the units. So we had probably 20 to 30 people. So within 6 months, we had done 12 two-day white belt sessions, and probably been through 500, 600 of the senior leaders in the organization. So this was again our attempt to get them engaged, train them, teach them, get them to take blinders off in terms of the way they thought about Lean. They think about Six Sigma, they think about waste, and those were invaluable. They were fantastic. And then the CEO and his direct reports, once we had done all 12 of those two-day white belt sessions, the CEO and his direct reports got together and they did their two-day white belt session. And I'll just quickly mention that we did a 6-hour Lean physical simulation, hands-on, experiential. So the leadership of the organization actually went through a Stickelbrick exercise and got to see firsthand what happens when you create flow. We have a webinar, by the way, that we did last year that talks about that physical simulation if you're interested in looking at that. So the white belt sessions were really critical. Another critical point that I'll mention with you, thing that happened is when I was, once I had conceptually designed the BPI program, the senior team was off doing strategic planning, and they gave me an hour to do a presentation on how we were going to design, develop, and deploy the Lean Sigma program, the OpEx program in the company. And at a break, the EVP of HR came up to me. He was a Navy helicopter pilot in an previous life, very disciplined guy. he came up and he said, Scott, I love this stuff. He said, I love the lean stuff. I like the statistics. I like the methodology. I like the discipline. But he says, I don't get the end game. I don't know what the end game is. So I got a flip chart and I drew this picture and I said, so MDS has an x-axis, which is customers. We got a y-axis, which is the value of those customers, how much money those customers bring to us. And then the z-axis is how long we keep those customers. That's stickiness. And if you multiply those three things together, you get a measure of the franchise value, what this franchise is worth, what this enterprise is worth. So this program, this Lean Sigma program, business process improvement program, is designed to grow the X, Y, and Z axis faster than if we didn't have it. And it was like a light bulb. It was like a eureka moment, an aha moment for this guy. He said, I got it. So I don't know. To me, it didn't seem like an aha moment because it just made sense to me. But to him, the minute I put this picture up there and I said, everything we're doing with Lean Sigma is intended to drive it. So we're going to drive it because we're going to position ourselves in the marketplace with marketing, with new products and services. We're going to improve our exchange of value with employees, with suppliers, with customers, and we're going to become more operationally excellent. So there's three ways that we can drive the growth of the enterprise value. And he said, I get it. So we just got to pick the right projects, right? Across those three things. Some in the first column, some in the second column, some in the third column. And so essentially what we're doing is we're using Lean Sigma, we're using Six Sigma to push the levers in the Deloitte Touche enterprise value map, which is what this thing is in the lower right-hand corner. Those are all levers down there. So Lean Sigma, the projects are going to be pushing those levers, which are going to be growing X, Y, and Z axis, which grows the cube and gets us moving from $1 to 1,000. Instead of just making $1 1,000, we make $1 6,400. We make $1 3,200, and then we make it 4,000, and then we make it 6,000, right? So that's the causal connection. And I think this a lot of times is not what executives understand and see. They don't understand the relationship between some little Kaizen event or some little DMAIC project and pushing the right levers that create more shareholder value and drive stock price from $6 to $60. So on the 8th, Jared's going to talk to you about how do I make sure that I pick all the right projects, and that I have the capacity to drive enough projects to drive growth faster than my competitors, to drive improvement faster than my competitors. With respect to project selection, we really let it happen naturally the first year. The CEO and I got together and he said, Scott, just let them pick what they're jazzed about. He says, because I could tell them exactly what to do. Our CEOs could tell them what to do, but that's not the right strategy. In the first year, let's just let them pick and let them get motivated. Then as we get smarter about this, then we can start to overlay our strategy. We can start to overlay strategy on top of that and start to shape the the nature of the. And then the other thing we did is we spent a lot of time picking the right candidate. So if I'm going to have a BPI team, I want them to be Navy SEALs. I want them to be really, really good. So we had this hopper. We had ideas coming in from customers, employees, workouts, value stream workshops, voice of the process. So we used a lot of data and facts. We knew which processes were performing, which processes had the most number of failure modes, which processes had the highest RPN scores, voice of the business. And we had a systematic process for filtering and picking the right projects. And then we used Enterprise Track to do portfolio management. We did monitor. So we looked at direct benefits. We looked at unit capability development objectives. So are we driving direct benefits? Are we driving dollars to the bottom line? Yes or no? We had targets for that. Are we building the capability of the organization? Are we building capability for the organization to grow, to do this itself? Are we addressing employee pain points? And then other benefits like EH&S and QWL. And so as we got better at this, we started to migrate and manage our portfolio. We started to think about, okay, in 2006, we only had about 10% of our portfolio in hard benefits, but by 2010, we were going to drive that to 60%. So we were going to naturally evolve the focus and the balance, the mix of projects. I think this was a perfect way to think about this. The CEO and I spent a lot of time thinking about how to do this in a natural way that would engage people and empower people. And so then we had, obviously, each year we had targets for what percentage of gross revenue we were going to expect in terms of direct benefits coming from the BPI program. So we had this all thought through. In terms of picking the right people, Bell candidates were identified as a normal outgrowth of an organization's performance management and development process. So we didn't really change that. We assessed Bell candidates on a set of 11 dimensions. 2 to 3 people would do that. So we had, these were the 11 dimensions that we looked at. So these were sort of the I don't know, the characteristics that we were looking for, the capabilities we were looking for. So this was the spec list. This was the rubric, so to speak, that we gave to people when they sent us candidates. And then we actually had them do an instrument. We had all of the candidates do an instrument that told us their profile, gave us information around their profile for thinking, as well as their profile for behavioral traits. And once we started to get data, from the candidates, and we started to get data on how they did on their projects, we were able to correlate scores on the assessment tool to how they performed on their black belt projects. So we knew that in terms of assertiveness, we needed people to be a 7. So this instrument over time, after about 1.5 years, this instrument almost became a predictive tool for us in terms of who we picked. So if we saw somebody that had a low energy level, came in with a 5 on energy level, that was a red flag for us. So even though somebody had been nominated, we used this instrument to gauge the extent to which we thought there was good fit in terms of being able to produce results. We spent a lot of time working with people, getting them to, we knew that we had good problem solvers. We always had good problem solvers. When we had a class of 22 people that we were running through black belt training. They were all smart. They were all seasoned people. But we didn't necessarily know that they were creation skillful. So we spent a lot of time talking to them about what being creation skillful means and how you do that. What's the difference between working to achieve a vision? So the simplest way to explain it is problem solving is about making something you have and don't want go away. So I have this, I don't want it, I got to get it to go away. Creation skillfulness is about envisioning things that you want and don't have and bringing them into being. And so to me, creation skillful is significantly more powerful as a motivator than problem solving. Problem solving is like, I got all these problems in this knapsack on my back, and every day I throw a new problem in a bag, and the bag gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And it's, woe is me, right? So I'm worn down by my problems, as opposed to, I don't have this and I want it, and I'm excited about having it, and I can see myself having it, and I want to bring it into being. If you can get teams of people to see the vision, that's powerful. So the other thing we spent a lot of time talking to people about is at cause versus at effect. We wanted to make sure that we had business process improvement specialists that were at cause. And what I mean by at cause is, if I got somebody that's at cause and they walk through the hall and there's litter on the floor, they pick it up and they put it in a waste basket. That's fixing the problem. But what I'd like to have is people that are thinking about, how do I stop the litter from getting on the floor? That would be fix the process. And then I don't know what fix the system would look like. But so my point is that if you've got somebody that's at cause, if they're connected to waste, they're connected to the things that are causing them to underperform, the organization to underperform, the worst you can expect from somebody that's at cause, that has that mindset, is that they're going to do nothing. And usually they do nothing because they know it's somebody else's job and they trust that somebody else is going to do it. So that's a great situation. The best you can expect is they fix the system. The worst you can expect is they don't do anything because they know somebody else is going to do it. When you've got a bunch of ad effect people walking around, what happens is that the best you can expect from ad effect people, in other words, they're disconnected from waste. They don't even see the waste, and even if they saw it, it wouldn't matter to them. They wouldn't care. It's not my job, right? So they're disconnected from waste, as an example. The best case with people that are out of effect is they do nothing, because if they do something other than do nothing, they'll enroll others. Can you believe all this waste around here? Can you believe management's not doing something about it? So I thought, I know I'm doing a quick version of this, but thought that this mindset, we spent a lot of time working with our belts on mindset management. And what we told them is train yourself and others to contribute in an at-cause frame of mind, but be prepared to experience people being at effect. Because in most organizations, that's the situation you're going to find yourself in. So when you condition people's minds, and you think about at cause, ideal, thought, word, deed, I can't stand to do busy work. So I consider myself an at cause person. I can't stand to do busy work. Because it's the waste of my life's energy. I have to know how my work is contributing and will contribute. I have to know how it fits into the bigger picture. I got to know what the end game is. If I'm just doing something to do it, it's a waste of my life's energy. Again, I'm not going to do it. And another at cause ideal thought is lead, follower, get out of the way. People need to be intelligently honest about what they can and can't do, will and won't do, or got done and didn't get done. So that's the kind of ideal thinking that we're talking about. Results, not excuses. Are the dials moving in the right direction and at the rate we said they'd move? Roles and rules are clear and people live to them. Accountabilities and authorities, the rules are clear and people work to them. And what's done? So if I'm working on something, what does done look like for that? And what will be different because I did this work? I want to have a sense that this is going to be a unique and important contribution to the organization. And then I guess bottom line, the lean question is, would the customer pay us for this work? And should we really be investing in it? So I just put this slide together almost at the last minute, just to get you to think a little bit about what that at cause ideal thought, word, deed illustrations look like. And it's our job to create a culture where people think like that, talk like that, walk like that. So I'm going to real quickly wrap things up here, and I'll pick up when we get together on the 8th. When we get together on the 8th, I'll start with this tail end stuff, and I'll tee up Jared, and then we'll get Jared going, because most of this stuff is skippable. So again, I'll cover that off. I'm just going to real quickly let you know that you can read through this. These are 3 slides. So late in 2007, just before I left to go back to Ohio State, this was I just literally typed what the CEO said. So this was that young CEO, and this is what he said to a group of 25 black belts we were training. And I've got 3 slide stuff here. I'd encourage you to look through this, because I think that this is some interesting retrospective thinking on his part. And I really valued his honesty and his thoughtfulness in sharing this with the group of young black belts. So just ahead, 8 December, we'll pick up where I left off, and then we'll have Jared talk about picking the right projects and creating migration strategies. Then on the 13th of December, we're going to talk about strategic performance improvement planning and periods of economic challenge. So how does performance improvement planning have to change when we're faced with situations like are ahead of us in 2023? If you can contact Jane, Jane Swisher if you have questions about IISE, me about the webinar series or the OP Analytics certification program, Jared if you have questions about the Fourier group. Thank you. This is the contact information. SAFE has provided once again the links to get to the outputs from this webinar. And we've got a short survey for you. If you'd be willing to take time, give us some feedback, tell us how we did. I know I rushed at the end. I apologize for that, but I'll slow down and we'll cover off some of that on the front end on the 8th. So thanks for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy, and let's see you when we see you. Thank you.